Life is full of movement, constantly flowing and changing. At least that's how it looks on the outside. But inside, there's even more action. Every living cell is a microscopic arena of high activity and great complexity. Some of these players might get to the big leagues, but they have to start small. Life's like that. It starts on a very small scale with single living cells, and every cell is alive with activity. Matter moves in and out across a membrane. Gases, foods, and nutrients generate energy. And a variety of systems transport materials. By learning the basic fundamentals, we get the skills we need to understand the big picture. It's simply science. We can think of a hockey game as a system. It's enclosed by these boards.
But this is a closed system because the players have to move in and out.
Right. Now think small. I mean small. Think of the hockey rink as a single microscopic cell. It's enclosed as well by a cell membrane.
But matter still has to move in and out.
Right. A cell needs fresh supplies to stay alive.
And those supplies come through the membrane.
Exactly. Nutrients and gas enter a cell through its membrane. The nutrients serve as a source of energy for the cell.
Science rules.
And the work the cell needs to do is to stay alive, to function.
The process that releases and traps energy inside the cell is called cellular respiration. Every living cell respires.
But it needs food, fuel.
Cellular respiration requires glucose and oxygen to release energy. Glucose, simple sugar containing stored chemical energy, is the main nutrient for cells. Oxygen reacts with glucose to release energy, fueling the work of the cell, keeping it alive. Excess carbon dioxide and water, products of this reaction, are removed as waste.
Okay, let's recap. Glucose and oxygen enter through the cell membrane. Respiration occurs, releasing energy that helps the cell function. But carbon dioxide and water are produced as wastes, so they have to leave.
Science rules.
Now, some organisms consist of a single cell.
Like amoebas.
Right. And their membranes are in direct contact with the outside world. You could say their food is right outside their door.
But most plants and animals are whole groups of cells that have to get food and get rid of waste.
With transportation systems inside the organism to deliver matter and expel it.
Like oxygen through our nose to our lungs.
Then through our bloodstream.
And food through a digestive system.
Plants have roots and leaves.
Good examples. Specialized systems to deliver food and oxygen to every single cell and get rid of wastes. These materials get in and out of each cell
By crossing the membrane.
Cellular respiration cannot occur without a cell membrane. It's one of the most important structures in a cell, vital to every living thing. Look at me. Now look at this leaf. Not a lot of similarity on the surface.
Actually, on the surface you do have a lot in common. Both plants and animals exchange gases with their environment, and that starts at the surface.
So because plants continually exchange gases with their environment, they need oxygen for cellular respiration.
And carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. There are openings on every part of the plant where this gas exchange takes place. Mostly, it happens on the underside of leaves. Each of these pores is called a stoma. The plural is stomata. Around the opening of the stoma are two guard cells. When they swell with water, they bend away from each other and open the stoma.
So carbon dioxide, oxygen, and water vapor move in or out of the leaf.
Right, permitting photosynthesis and respiration.
You said there was gas exchange on every surface. What about the stem and roots?
The stem is covered by an outer layer called a cuticle.
Like bark on a tree.
Exactly. Or a waxy material, say on a flower stem. But the stem also has tiny pores for gases to move in and out. They're called lenticels, and they allow gas exchange between the atmosphere and the stem cells.
All right. So the stems and leaves are exposed to air. How can roots exchange gases?
Well, even the soil has tiny air spaces. Gases enter and leave the root system through single-celled growths called root hairs. There are millions of these microscopic surfaces exposed to the soil. They transport gases as well as water with dissolved nutrients in and out of the root system.
So basically, plants breathe.
Right, through stomata, lenticels, and root hairs.
Yeah. So tell me how cellular respiration and tree metabolism all work together.
When energy is used, respiration occurs. It's part of the chemical process that gives off CO2. And it happens at the needle level, the branch level, at the tree level. So even though respiration occurs at a cellular level, at a very small scale, it shows up at every scale you can think of, from the cell to the leaf, to the needle, to the tree, and all the way through the whole forest ecosystem.
I've heard that the trees are the lungs of the earth. Now what exactly does that mean?
Trees breathe in carbon dioxide, and when they die, they breathe out carbon dioxide. But when they breathe in carbon dioxide, they release oxygen to the atmosphere. So they do, during their photosynthesis process, they do the opposite of what you and I do. And if you look at this on a global scale, look over the whole forest of the whole world, you can actually see, looking at the atmosphere and measuring carbon dioxide, you can see the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere going up in the winter and going down in the summer. And I can show you this on a graph. So it looks like the trees are breathing in during the summer, breathing out during the winter. And that's why we call it the lungs of the earth. The trees and green things on the planet are like the lungs of the earth. What this shows is our data that are collected from the atmosphere, showing the concentration in this direction of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere over the whole of the globe, going from South Pole to the North Pole. Here we have the forests breathing out, and we know they're breathing out, first of all, because it's winter, and secondly, because we're at a peak of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. As we move into the summer period down here, the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere decreases, and we have a lower concentration left in the atmosphere. We know they're the forests because in the northern regions we have mainly land mass, forests and green plants are predominant. In the southern part we have mainly water surfaces, so we have phytoplankton, and the oscillations, the breathing out and in, is very much smaller. From a climate change point of view, what's of interest is that we have the average level slowly increasing over time. In the 10-year period of record here, from 1981 to 1989, concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has gone from about 305 parts per million up to about 345 parts per million. So there's been a significant increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. What's causing all these oscillations is the breathing in and out by the forests and by the other plants of the world, and the increases in that is what we're trying to understand.
We all need oxygen. All animals and plants do. But when we breathe it, where does it go?
Animals have special structures to absorb the gases we breathe. This is one of them. It's a lung.
A pig's lung.
Mammals, birds, reptiles, and amphibians all absorb gases through their lungs.
The gas has to get there first.
The air we breathe enters our body through our nose and mouth. Then it travels through air passages to our lungs.
But this isn't just a sack of air. It's full of tissue.
Full of alveoli.
What?
Alveoli, plural for alveolus. An alveolus is a little sac of air lined with single-layer cells. Each lung contains hundreds of millions of alveoli.
And they all fill up with the air we breathe in.
Right. They absorb oxygen and pass it into very tiny blood vessels called capillaries that surround the alveoli.
That's how the oxygen gets to all the other cells in our body. It's transported from capillaries through the bloodstream.
For cellular respiration, to release energy.
So the oxygen that every cell needs is originally absorbed right here in millions of alveoli in the lung.
The lungs don't work if you live underwater. Fish absorb oxygen from water through gills. Like the alveoli and lungs, gills have lots of surface area to absorb oxygen. The gills are richly supplied with capillaries, which carry the oxygen to the bloodstream that supply the rest of the body.
Gas exchange in animals is accomplished by a variety of structures. The same result. It gets oxygen to the cells for respiration. Respiration which releases energy for life processes. The action out here and the activity inside a cell are both regulated by a membrane. Erica?
Well, that's right, Darren. Let's take a look at that cell membrane right now. Roll tape. The membrane that surrounds a cell protects it and isolates it from the outside, from its external environment. Okay, freeze it there. This is the membrane. It encloses the cell, keeps it stable inside.
Exactly. The membrane regulates the materials that enter and leave. It allows certain molecules and ions to cross into the cell or move out of it. And because it only permits certain materials through, the membrane is called semi-permeable.
But the question is, how do these substances get across that membrane? Let's go live to the lab.
To answer that question, we have to concentrate.
Clue.
Molecules are always on the move, bumping into each other, spreading out, and diffusing.
They move from areas of higher concentration into areas of lower concentration
Where there were less of those molecules to begin with.
until they're evenly spread out.
Like the aroma of fresh coffee. The sugar that dissolves in it. The thermal energy that flows from the hot cup to my cold hands.
Molecules move down a concentration gradient,
This slide is like a gradient. It has a slope.
and it doesn't take any extra energy to move down a slope.
The molecules simply move on their own down the gradient.
But with the cell, there's still a membrane in the way.
Remember, a cell membrane is semi-permeable.
You've got it. A semi-permeable membrane allows certain materials to diffuse right through it. It's called passive transport.
Passive transport. No energy added.
Dissolved chlorine diffuses throughout this pool. But there's another molecule in here that can also diffuse.
H2O. Water.
Water molecules also diffuse down a concentration gradient. When they cross a membrane, it's called osmosis.
So osmosis is actually diffusion of water molecules across a membrane,
From an area where there's more water to where there's less.
down a concentration gradient.
That's right. Here's an example. These are red blood cells under normal conditions. Their external and internal environments have the same concentration of dissolved molecules. If the external solution becomes more concentrated, That means it has less water than inside the cells.
So water molecules move out of the cells by osmosis.
The membranes of the blood cells become wrinkled. When the outside environment is less concentrated, water moves into the cells, causing them to swell or expand, and possibly rupture. Diffusion, osmosis, and the concentration gradient all result in materials moving into and out of the cell through its semi-permeable membrane. There's no additional energy required, and that's why we call it passive transport. So a concentration gradient is
Like a slope.
Molecules move from high concentration to low concentration.
so the molecules move down the gradient. They can't move up.
That takes energy. You used energy to flick the marble.
It's against the gradient.
Oh, hold that thought. Now, you know these roots absorb minerals so the plant can live. What I told you that their cells already have a higher concentration of those substances.
And the concentration gradient would actually go out of the roots.
But minerals do get into roots.
You mean pushing against the gradient?
Using energy.
Exactly. Some materials move in and out of cells against their concentration gradients. That takes energy. It's called active transport. Cell membranes consist of two fatty layers containing components such as proteins. Some of these proteins transport matter into and out of the cell against a gradient. They're called carrier or transport proteins.
So they need energy.
Right. Energy for active transport comes from the breakdown of molecules called adenosine triphosphate.
Adenosine triphosphate?
ATP for short. These molecules have stored energy that they trap during cellular respiration. ATP is converted to a simpler form, energy is released.
That gets the carrier proteins going.
And the carrier proteins capture specific molecules and move them in or out of the cell across the membrane.
So it goes both ways.
That's right. Active transport brings in required materials and gets rid of wastes.
Like a pump.
It's often called that.
But what if the pump doesn't work?
I'm Lindsay Power, and I'm 16 years old, age 10.
Cystic fibrosis is a disorder that's directly related to the active transport in the body. Cells use certain proteins to transport molecules and ions in and out of the cell. When that doesn't happen, chloride is stuck in the cell. In cystic fibrosis, the transport mechanism either is not working at all or isn't working properly. In the cystic fibrosis patient, what is missing is something to transport the chloride ion. This makes fluid and sodium leave that area, and so that makes the mucus very, very thick and sticky. They do have problems with their lungs, and that's why I do physiotherapy and inhalation treatments daily, as well as take numerous pills. Some of these pills are to help digest the food, and that varies from like 1 pill to 8 pills every meal they take, and as well as snacks. They also have to take extra vitamins, multivitamins, and vitamin E, because they have problems digesting the fat. Those are in the fat.
Usually we do it 4 times or every 4 hours, just to get rid of the mucus. And, like before that, we usually wear a mask. That's to like make the mucus less sticky and to try to get it out too. And physio just helps to like really get rid of it.
We're very lucky today for patients with cystic fibrosis. The gene was found in 1989, so that has really opened a lot of doors. What they're doing right now in gene therapy, we hope will give us a cure in the years to come. But also working on other aspects of cystic fibrosis besides the gene. One area they're working on is enzymes and the digestion. What's happened in the last 10, 20 years is the pills that used to be a whole bowl full is down to a handful. So it is improving.
Cells absorb and get rid of materials through passive and active transport, if those materials can fit through the membrane. But cells also absorb larger substances that can't fit through the membrane openings. Some large but essential molecules must be absorbed into cells by a process called endocytosis. Endo for in and cyto for cell. The cell wraps its membrane around the particle and completely encloses it. Once the particle is absorbed, enzymes inside the cell digest it. The reverse of this is called exocytosis. Think of exo for exit. It's the discharge of large particles through the membrane. Particles too large to pass through membrane pores. Waste materials are often moved out of cells by exocytosis.
Energy is needed for many types of transport. In a single cell, active transport, endocytosis, and exocytosis are all ways of moving materials across the membrane, and they all require energy. For any game to be effective, the playing area needs to be limited to certain dimensions. Cells are also limited to a certain range of sizes. If they grow too large, they become unmanageable. For one thing, the nucleus, the control center, simply can't handle the unlimited activity. But perhaps even more important is the role of the cell membrane. As a cell grows larger, the efficiency of the membrane decreases.
But cells do grow, don't they?
Within limits. As a cell grows, its volume and contents increases more rapidly than its surface area.
The volume inside increases much more than the surface area that expands around it.
Compared to the volume, the surface area becomes relatively smaller and smaller. If growth continues, the membrane will be overworked. It won't be able to transport all of the materials that its growing contents demand in and out of the cell. Finally, it may even rupture. So there's a limit to the amount of volume a cell's surface area can sustain. A higher ratio means more surface area to volume. That means more efficiency when it comes to exchanging heat, gases, nutrients, and wastes with the cell's environment.
Surface area affects all kinds of structures. A car radiator has a lot of surface area to dissipate heat. It keeps the cooling system cool.
An elephant's ear is a natural radiator. The large surface area of exposed skin allows faster heat loss when the animal warms up.
And remember the alveoli in our lungs? The more surface area in contact with capillaries, the faster oxygen enters the blood.
If these two cereal boxes were cells, which would be more efficient?
The one with more surface area, less volume.
So the higher surface area to volume ratio?
Now let's eat.
First, let's work it out.
John and Rennell find the total surface area by adding the areas of each side, and find the volume by multiplying height by width by length.
The small box has a surface area to volume ratio of 320 square centimeters over 350 cubic centimeters.
The bigger box has a lower ratio. It's 1,900 square centimeters over 4,400 cubic centimeters.
So if these were cells, the smaller box would be more efficient because its surface area to volume ratio is higher.
You've got it. Now go ahead and expand your surface area.
Okay.
Science rules.
You know that a larger cell is less efficient than a smaller one. But what can you say about a multicellular organism, the whole plant or animal? Is it affected by its overall surface area to volume ratio? Take these two organisms. Can you predict the difference in their metabolic rate, the rate at which they convert and use energy? Remember, larger cells are slower to respond and less active than smaller ones. In fact, the same principle applies to whole organisms. The moose has a lower surface area to volume ratio and a lower level of activity than the mouse.
That's right.
Life on the ice, life in a cell. Similar game plan. Let's look at the highlights. Erica?
Okay. A cell needs matter to move through its membrane, like oxygen,
Right. And with glucose, the cell can respire.
releasing energy and waste.
The materials that cross the membrane move passively down their gradient or actively against it.
And the cell is limited to a certain size.
The nucleus can only control so much.
And the surface area can only expand so much. And then...
So next time you're at a big game, cheering on the action, just remember where it all begins, with that all-important microscopic game in every living cell.